Drawing and painting Frangipani with expression and essence. Have you ever tried to draw or paint a Frangipani and get lost in the process? I certainly have. Today we'll have a closer look and see if we can solve the puzzle and be able to then draw it even off by heart. We'll be using special techniques that'll take your floral art to the next level. No reference required. So let's get cracking. We'll start off with the drawing and talk about essence later when we get to the painting part. And we'll make it really simple too. We'll start with a little dot for the center and mark out 5 dots for the tips of the overlapping petals. To make it easier, you can draw a 5-point star and use the points as a guide for the petal dots. And then we can get rid of the star. We now need to draw 5 petals starting from the center, nice and round, going to the tip and back again. Just like that, just like an egg. They also need to overlap a little, and 4th one and the 5th one. Now we can erase the lines around the center dot. Sticking to the left side of each petal, we can now trace over this line and add a fold. But to add the fold, first add a little angle near the center and then draw a parallel line along the side of the petal and curve it at the top. Doesn't have to be completely parallel. If it just starts off that way, it does help. And then on to the next petal, always keeping in mind the leading edge and the little angle at the base. This little angle helps us and gives us the illusion of the petals unfolding from the center. We need to do this for all 5 petals. And there's our first Frangipani. For the second, let's do it a little differently, and we'll do it with continual loops. We just need to keep in mind the spacing of the petals. Everything requires a little bit of practice, but the rewards are worth it. So always keeping in mind the leading edge and then the little angle in the center, we can then make the fold of the leading edge, always on the same side of the petals. This loop-de-loop method makes it really simple and fast. So you can practice some loops. There's 1 loop and then just keep going. Remember that spiral game as a kid? Now we'll do one slightly turned on an angle, and we'll start with 3 loops. We need to add a little right angle, just like in the photo. This little angle will help us with the petal closest to us, and is also where the 5th petal overlaps the 4th one. We mark a dot at about 4:30 and draw this 4th petal in. The 5th petal then overlaps this one. We now have the bones for our Frangipani on its side. We'll rub out all the confusing lines in the middle and draw in our petals and folds. It might take a little bit of practice, but as soon as you get the hang of how each consecutive petal overlaps the previous one, and the folds are always on the same side of the petals, it becomes a lot of fun. Now we can add the other petals that all sit behind these 2 front ones. Always having the fold on the same side. It's easier to rub out the lines so you don't get confused by them. If you'd like to follow along as I now quickly sketch these onto the watercolour paper, it'll just reinforce the process, or feel free to jump ahead to the painting part. I'm using Baohong 300 GSM cold press watercolour paper and a 2B pencil. I'll be sketching in 3 Frangipanis just the way we've practiced, and I'll add the leaves in later. I find this loopy loop way easy and fun, and it also gives me the feel of the flowers. Frangipanis have a beautiful soft scent, and the ones in our garden are finally flowering, even though there's only a few blooms there. We received a cutting once, and they grow really well from cuttings. Now, remember the leading lines and the angles at the center, and then you can round off the folds too. Just go with the flow and don't think about it too much. Just see it more as an abstract little exercise, and the flowers will just appear. For the next one, I might just turn the paper instead of trying to turn my head or myself. I'll just make this one come out of here and start with 3 loops. And then of course the little right angle, and mark the 4:30 p.m. time slot, which helps me draw out the petal. The little angle is where the 5th petal overlaps the 4th petal. You can possibly get away without those little tiny angles on each individual petal at the center of the flower, but in doing them or getting used to them, you create that lovely spiral effect of growth. I'm placing the 3rd Frangipani under the first 2. With the petals that aren't seen, I'm just hovering over the existing 2 and just laying my pencil where it needs to be so I don't have to erase the lines. I'm rolling my kneadable rubber around to get rid of some excess graphite. And now we're ready to paint. So let's talk about essence. What do you think that is? I think it's what makes something special the way it is, the feel of it. I just love the way the yellow bursts out of the center of the flower, and I love the way the petals spiral out of the center. And those folds with their shadows just make it. So now these are the important things that we can't lose sight of, which means that we can easily substitute a little bit of precision for those magical ingredients we just spoke about. And I'll explain the process along the way. So today we're using a 1/2 inch Rosemary & Co. Dagger brush, a number 2 Polina mop brush, a 1/2 inch flat brush. I have my clean water ready and a paper towel. I'll be using my 1/2 inch Dagger brush. They're so wonderful and easy to use, and I'll be wetting the insides of the flowers and also the area around them, and just trying to keep the folds white or dry. The only thing I have to be careful of is not having any pools or puddles of water. If I see any, they need to be brushed out, just so that I have an even glossy surface. Notice how I'm not confining the water just to the petals, but going outside the petals as well. I'm now reaching for some creamy Daniel Smith Hansa Yellow Medium paint. It needs to be a bit creamy because we have water there. Now I'm coming in with the tip of my Dagger brush and the creamy yellow paint, and look at that. It just spreads so beautifully, and it doesn't matter how far it goes. Doesn't matter at all. I know this is why I'm in love with watercolour, because of the magic it does, and I think most of you as well. So easy with the Dagger brush. You've got to get one if you don't have one. These ones from Rosemary & Co. are just so beautiful. No, I'm not sponsored by anyone, but I'm just saying. My flowers are still quite wet, so the only thing I can do now is to use thicker paint than before. So I'm going for some Daniel Smith Aussie Red Gold and just applying a little bit of thick creamy paint to the tip of my brush. I'm applying it to the center of the flower and then outwards to the petals. You can do a much more precise job by looking at a reference, but I'm just going for it and enjoying the process. I now need to wash my brush and pat off the excess water, and then I can blend out the orange into the yellow. And I'm really starting to get the feel of these Frangipanis. It doesn't matter that they're not perfect. Also really like a spontaneous flow of paint, so I'm not sticking just to the petals. And even if the folds get a little bit yellow later, it doesn't matter. It's just more natural looking. This helps with both expressiveness and essence because it's just beautiful little bursts of colour that mingle into the background. I love this brush. It's a 1/2 inch Dagger brush from Rosemary & Co. It's a synthetic, and I absolutely love the way the point can reach into fine pointy areas and the brush is still big enough to lay a wash where I need to. It holds plenty of water and does all the hard work for me. If you want a special brush, I really recommend a good Dagger brush. And now I'll let that dry for a bit. My flowers are now dry and I'm going to wet the background all around the flowers with a nice wide brush. Again, I'm not being particularly super pedantic about it, but I do need to wet the paper properly around the edges like this, and I do feel that this Baohong paper has more sizing on it than other papers, so the water takes a little longer to absorb. I haven't gone right to the edges of the flowers because I can always do that with my brush later. I'm now using my number 2 Polina Bright mop brush and come in with some more yellow just randomly dropped here and there on the page. This yellow will form part of the background, but it will also create an atmospheric feel for the Frangipanis. Just little blobs here and there, all around. I'm now going to add some Pthalo Blue to the background. So a little mix of creamy Pthalo Blue. If you think that this particular colour is way too strong, you can always add a little bit of Chinese white to it, which will just thicken it and make it a little bit less bright. To keep the background nice and fresh, I'm only going around the yellow patches, not going over anything, and I'm painting around the petals of the flowers. When you paint around something like this, it's called negative painting. It's called negative painting because you're actually painting the background around the positive shape that you're hoping to reveal in the end. So by me painting these blue shapes, a flower will emerge. Also, when painting the background like we have with the yellow first and then with the blue around it, it really avoids creating any mud, and it automatically leaves a few gentle white spots which add that freshness to your painting. See that little 4-cornered shape that I've just painted? That's a typical example of negative painting, and it's revealed 2 flowers, not just one. Just painting a few final shapes around the flowers, and then it's ready to leave to dry. After leaving it to dry for a while, I'm just finishing off the drying process with my hairdryer. And now I'm rubbing out any visible pencil marks. Before I go on to the shadows of the flowers, we're going to put the leaves in first. This is because I like to match the shadow colors to the surroundings, and shadows are always reflecting what's around them. Just to keep me on track, I'm making a simple sketch for the leaves just a middle vein and then some side veins. And just to show you on some paper, because I can see that we can barely see what I've done. Here is the main vein and the side veins, and the purpose of the pencil marks really is to just avoid the pencil marks. We're going to negatively paint around them. I've purposely been very loose on the shape of the entire leaf. See how the line's really light? But it's up to you if you'd like to keep within those lines a bit more. I don't want the leaves to be too prominent in the painting because my focus is the lovely Frangipanis. So what I'm doing is I'm wetting the background, but again, I don't want it too wet. So after wetting it, I will take a tissue and blot the water off the paper. This will give me some damp paper. The purpose of wetting the paper and then blotting it to make it dry is to have the leaves be soft enough but still be able to have the veins show. So now I'm mixing some gamboge and a bit of Hansa yellow medium. You can just stick to one or the other or have both, whatever you like. And then some Pthalo Blue, which is very strong. So I'm going to tone it down with some Quinacridone Sienna, and I think that'll do. See, my paint is still quite creamy because we are working on a damp surface. I'm being guided by the lines that I've made, and I'm just going to paint segments of the leaf around the lines like this, and now I have automatic veins. I'm not too worried about the shape on the outside. In fact, I haven't even drawn it on there, but you can. It'll make the job a bit easier. I've now picked up my freshly washed Dagger brush, and incidentally, I forgot to tap off the water, and you'll see that it's a little bit too wet. Luckily, I got away with it, but you know, it would be far better to tap the brush off. Also, you don't need to use the Dagger brush here. I could have used my flat brush too. I've kept the leaf very soft next to the flower. This gives it a more atmospheric feel. If the leaf was very dark next to the flower, it would be a little bit harsher. I'll be doing 2 more leaves, one at the bottom and one at the top. With this bottom one, I haven't even sketched in the veins. As you can see, I've just painted one in with the brush, whereas the top one doesn't have a middle brush stroke. And the lines are also a little bit more dry brushy too, because the paper is already drying, but it gives it a nice feel. So again, I've washed my brush and tapped it dry and am softening the edges and giving the leaf some shape. The point of the Dagger brush is really handy for getting into those little crevices. With the paper drying so quickly, I'm just checking to see how damp the top of the page is, and it's still a little bit damp, so it's going to be okay. The paint now is a little bit thinner than before, and I'm doing the leaf the same as I did before. I've washed my brush, tapped it dry, and am just gently softening the edges. Okay, so it's finally time for the shadows under the folds of the flowers. To do this, there are so many greys you can go for, but I find that if you incorporate a bit of the background, chances are it'll look a lot more natural. So to the green that I've already created for the leaves, I'm adding a little bit of burnt sienna and to try to get a very weak soft grey. Now mind you, I could have gone for any other colour, it's just the one that I thought of first. What you need to do is test the colour and see how it looks on a separate piece of paper. With the mixture being very light and harmonised with the background, it's looking okay. Note also how easy it is with the Dagger brush to pull out some nice thinner veins. I'm softening the edges that I've painted and will be touching them up soon to make them stronger, but it's good to have them blended out. I'm using my number 2 Polina mop brush as a damp brush, ready to blend out the colours that I've got on my Dagger brush. I'm not following a reference photo, not even my fine specimen of the Frangipani flower. I'm just going with the flow and thinking that the light is coming from the upper left-hand corner and just going with the flow. I'm being pretty much soft and gentle with my shadows at first because I can always build them up. I'm happy with the overall placement of the shadows and have now added a tiny touch of indigo to my green burnt sienna mix, which just gives it a deeper tone. I'm putting in the marks first and then I'll take my damp mop brush and blend them out again. I've added a little bit of very creamy undiluted Quinacridone Sienna and adding it to the center of the flowers. I've washed and tap dried my Dagger brush and I'm just reinforcing the center. See the little star that forms from the middle. Now for a little bit of attention to the other 2 flowers. I'm thinking that petal in there would be shadowed by the top flower, so it's getting some more shadow. I'm now changing up my shadow color and adding a little bit of the Pthalo Blue to it as well. That way everything reflects from each other. Everybody paints shadows differently, but all in all, there's so many different colors in shadows, and generally if you stick to the colors that you have in the background, it's really fun seeing your flowers come to life. I'm adding a little bit of shadow to the under part of this 4th little petal here, because the light is coming from the top. And again on this one. And the cast shadow from the top Frangipani onto the bottom petal of the 3rd one. I've added a few more little centers to the other 2 flowers and am blending out the Quinacridone Sienna. Like I mentioned earlier, the Dagger brush is great for pulling out some little wrinkles or veins through the Frangipanis from the center. This top Frangipani is the focal point of the painting, so I'm making a couple of the petals a little bit more pronounced and added some Quinacridone Sienna to the fold shadows as well. Now to highlight the flowers a little bit more and add some drama to the scene, I'm taking some Pthalo Blue and I'm negatively painting around the flowers, but I'm leaving some gaps too, just to make it a little bit more organic, you could say. And blending it out, it also becomes a little bit more interesting. You might be wondering what the yellow is in the background. It could be another flower or anything. And I might even dab that little bit out. There we go. And I'll add some of this same mixture to the bottom Frangipani. Just making them pop out a little bit more. But again, not everywhere. I'm now adding a tiny touch of Indigo Blue to the Pthalo Blue to make it a little bit darker and coming in to some of these areas around the petals. Mainly around the top flower because it's the one that needs to be highlighted the most. We've come to the end of our Frangipanis today, and I'm interested, did you get the hang of it? Did you find it easy with the loops? And just keeping an eye on where the light is and putting in the shadows, which incidentally can be nearly any colour you like, and how they all fit into each other and harmonise, which gives our Frangipanis some atmospheric essence. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. And don't forget, if you've got any questions, I'm busting to hear them. Thanks again. Bye for now.